of course, you would get people who come up to you, when you talk about animal communication, they say, yeah, and whales are cleverer than humans, you know. So, I mean, even CBO got that kind of thing. But, I mean, ultimately, the students are open to these questions that are problematic for more discipline-based studies. And, of course, the obvious one as well is, words with culture begin, nature end, or, what's the overlap, etc., those kinds of things.
I want to talk about one of the things that my students have a hard time grasping or resist is when I explain agency and the development of subjectivity of the cell, as I've done today with molecular mimicry or these indexical associations. They're always very disappointed that it's such a physical situation that I'm describing here, that subjectivity and agency could arise in that way. Well, isn't that all chemical? Oh, but yeah, it's unpredictable associations here. As if they think that agency and intelligence and semiosis is some sort of magic, and they're disappointed when I give them some nuts and bolts. And then on the other hand, what they're often very interested in learning about with biosemiotics mistakenly is that I'm going to show them how the universe is conscious. Cells can perform, the universe and rocks, and everything must be capable of semiosis. So those are the two things that I have to deal with, and it's hard to clarify, and it's hard to meet those expectations.
Students I encounter, okay, let me separate the two cases where I give my formal lectures, electrical and electronics engineering, for example, teaching circuit theory. The little amount of semiotics I put in there is that at the beginning of the course, I declared this is not about what things are. What I'm going to teach you is just a language model. So I hope that this always evokes some kind of consciousness in the students. But otherwise, where biosemiotics is discussed much more often are my seminars, completely informal and completely interdisciplinary. And the kind of students who are attracted there are already a utterly wise group. So I'm preaching to the converts, but of course most of them also come without knowing what's going to come up. So in this case, anyway, have a great diversity there. There are computer scientists, biologists, philosophy students, comp-sci students, etc. So they all come with different expectations, and well, it's interesting, of course. Some of them, let's say, some computer scientists who are already considering themselves quite open-minded and progressive into the new possibilities, have difficulties in study, for example, dealing with semiotic freedom. But others not. On the other hand, also those coming up from molecular biology have great difficulties in giving up the quite reductionist perspective they have acquired. So it really depends, and it very much depends actually on the personal attitude of the students, because they can just consume what has been offered or reject.
Question. Anyone else can also jump in?
I just wanted to remark that although I haven't been teaching biosemiotics, I have been trying to explain it to my colleagues within bioinformatics a number of times. And one of the stumbling blocks or points where they have difficulty grasping it is they say, but isn't this a big anthropomorphism talking about science and interpretation. And I say it's on the contrary. We're trying to distinguish what is real for the organism and or for the cell, and what is only real for us. But that I find a point of resistance.
Did you add something you wanted to add? And anyone else who wants to? Sure, Josh.
Well, my experience was in the late 1970s and the early 80s when I met social semiotics with Halliday. And I thought that was a great idea, but it doesn't happen anything. But then I got a position in teacher education, and I thought that since there are many different disciplines and there is semiotics in any discipline, there might be a hope to teach the teachers for these different. So I made courses over 2 years. It couldn't be based further, but when I then started teaching myself within Norwegian, the course Norwegian in teacher education, because that's language that should be easier to connect to it. I put in some bits from different sources, and then I came over Uexküll, Life as a Sign, Jesper had heard it in Oslo. I thought that was a great idea, so I put it in my own thesis, and then had more background to put into the different the bachelor degree or master degree, and had the responsibility for the PhD little by little. It seemed that could be quite a good possibility for me to kind of have the nice evangelion to the Norwegian population, but I'm very disappointed because of my own ability to get across what's interesting or to teach them with the right bits. But there is the reason why I wanted to speak now is that there is something intellectual thing that with semiosis and semiotics that is not ready for people who are just 18, 19, 20 almost 30. There is some kind of general understanding that's meta perspective, and the ability to go into a real topic and go back again. It seemed to be an advanced understanding in intellectual capacity that I think that's the reason that it's so difficult to spread the discipline.
Great. Well, we're going to follow up on that with a second question. Josh, Nicola, and Whit.
Yeah, actually, just to follow up on Sigmund, my experience is that a lot of students struggle with this notion of simultaneity, which Calevi, of course, has been working on too. It's really, I guess you could say it's meta in the sense that, at least from our reductionist perspective, you have to start with, say, in a Lachmanian language, compatibility and incompatibility, that they need to coexist simultaneously. It's not just that one happens and then the other happens sequentially. And then, of course, pairs, first and second and third, is people can't wrap their head around the fact that each needs to co-constitute the other, and then they think, well, if they co-constitute the other, can't you reduce, one to the other two, or two to the one? And versus explicitly, they know they have to be simultaneously distinct and interrelated, and this is a much higher level of thought, I think. And then just finally, it's interesting, of course, this goes through the functional circle. Calevi is always careful to say it's not a cycle, it's a circle, that the perception and action are simultaneous. And then I just recently conclude with digging into Claude Shannon's communication theory, his relative entropy. Even he he's at the level of understanding that you have to, and Cecile Malaspina, our shared colleague, talks about this understanding of a Wiener kind of understanding of negentropy simultaneously with Shannon's understanding of expansion of the possibility space, and that these must coexist simultaneously, and it's only then that we really can begin to understand the complexity of the system.
Nicola.
Last year I insist, and at the end, within the course of History of Semiotics by Remo Gramigna, I did like 2 lectures about the history of biosemiotics at the University of Turin. This was really important because the students in Italy were not aware of the powerful of biosemiotic methodology. And this is really important because it permit me to change the face of biosemiotics in front of Italian landscape. And nowadays, I feel that there is a newborn in the newborn of biosemiotics in Italy, and one of those examples is the European project that we won with biosemiotics. 2 Marie Curie, for example, the first one, Masked project, Devon, Brian, Ludmila, Yogi, and so on, and my own Marie Curie project that is about specifically biosemiotic terms. So there is a newborn in Europe, I think, that have a new possibility for biosemiotic understanding. And next year I will teach the course History of Biosemiotics in Prague, and another course called Biosemiotics and Ecology in Colombia. So I'm really excited about it because I feel that we are changing the landscape of semiotics. But in my own experience, what is more interesting for the students is to understand that our understanding of the world, our interpretation of the world is not the only one, either the best one. So we are living inside a very complex process of living system and living semiosis. So this is a great period and great age for biosemiotics.
Yes, hello. First of all, thank you for so interesting, inspiring to be here. When did I start with biosemiotics? My PhD, my research education was in Denmark, in Aarhus, which was really a powerhouse of semiotics at the time, led by pedagogical. And he had all his old teachers from Paris coming in all the time, so name a French philosopher and it was on the lecture list. It was incredible. In the early 90s, 93, I finished my PhD on semiotics of architecture. It was, I think, inherently biosemiotical, but that term wasn't really, we heard, I don't know, I hardly heard it mentioned. Jesper Hoffmeier was around and like against Jernfeld and these people, so it was all cooking at that period. With a finished PhD back in Oslo, there was not much response, to put it mildly. But another thing that happened in 93 was the Oslo Accords in the Middle East. And there happened to be an open position at the American University in Beirut. So I thought, okay, I've been writing my PhD about how we think with our environments and how, like the animals in the Uexküll. I hadn't read about the Uexküll yet at that point. But I thought, yeah, why not, after all that theoretical work, let's have a look at a city and its pathology. So I went to Beirut and started teaching, obviously, and I have photos still with icon index and symbols and stuff on the ruins in the city. It was completely destroyed after 17 years of civil war, which is a very different thing from being bombed in Gaza, because it was a war that went inwards from 17 fractions. So anything of our social systems or spatial structures was not there. It was, you understand what a postal service or a renovation service is when it doesn't exist. You understand what planning is when there's no planning authority. And you sit there starting to sort of reshape and put that urban environment back on its feet. So that was my first years of teaching with the students there. It was very formative to me, and I think also to some of the students at least. Some of them have been doing great since. And the rest is more like, I think, the rest of you have been doing also.
Excellent. Did you want to talk about your teaching?
Yeah, thank you very much. I also wanted to mention, as many of you know, I have a colleague called Weissner from Prague, and we teach theoretical biology, and within the tradition of theoretical biology, we have to talk about big scale, and I also speak about processual approaches or processual metaphysics in biology, biosemiotics included. And I have actually the vice versa situation in Calavi. A lot of students are biologists, not so educated in biophilosophy or philosophy in general. But that's good, especially molecular biologists are responding to biosemiotics very nicely, because molecular biology is using the terminology anyways, right? And now we finally grasp that it's actual thing, right? So that's good, and also we have, for possible exchanges in terms of our cooperation, we have a master program in theoretical biology. There are some people who deal with biosemiotics, Tor here included. I will have another student from Switzerland coming to work on Uexküll this year, and we have also 2 PhD programs in philosophy and history of natural sciences, and also in theoretical biology. So if you have someone who would like to visit us, some of your students, it's possible to arrange that. So, and I think biosemiotics is thriving after I, retook the lectures after Anton Markus, you know him. So I try to put a little bit of biosemiotics even in the basic evolutionary biology courses. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Tim, yes, of course.
My experience is a lot more basic, I think. So I've introduced and taught biosemiotics across 2.2 universities. And I've done it by stealth. Basically, no one understands what biosemiotics is, never heard of it, and most people in my discipline haven't even really heard of semiotics, students-wise coming in. So I've had to introduce it through stealth. Now I've had the luxury of that because teaching in studio, it's an open field, you can do that. But I've also then introduced it through a master's program which I designed. But both of these things, you're able to introduce semiotics, so biosemiotics, through theory. And I think the benefit is it makes the architectural students think in a slightly different way, and I think it brings a richness to what they're doing. But it has 2 outputs, and I'm interested in what you experience about your outputs. Those students that really engage with it and go down the rabbit hole end up producing work that is totally, if you can get more than abstract, it's abstract. And then we end up in judgments or reviews with other architectural staff where there's conversations about, well, this isn't architecture, what is this, it's design. What does it mean, how does a human do this, etc. Why are you designing with termites? So it's fundamentally abstract because you go down to the meaning, signification and the biological thinking. Those that, because we have to produce a product in architecture, those that then kind of realise this tension then end up saying, it's really interesting, but at the end I have to produce a building to produce the output. And that's the kind of experience I've had. So there's this tension between the interest in the theory, but then actually what you can use that theory for.
Anyone else want to read this before we go to the next? Oh, yes. Thank you.
I'm super happy to be here because I experienced this as a group of people that allow allow themselves to be influenced by others. And when it comes to biosemiotics, it is at the same, for me it is academic, but at the same time I feel how everybody is open to be influenced and to change in terms of application. What does it mean? What do I take from it? How can I improve? How can I change my own teaching, my practice? So where I come from is the interest of applying biosemiotics in the immediate application of everyday life, because I'm an organizational consultant, some of us are too here. That means that there is a question or a challenge to have very little time in how to do the application. And that comes with a lot of psychological stuff in terms of defenses, beliefs, not beliefs. So I just finish here by saying that I'm so happy, but also that I see my task into using biosemiotics, applying it in terms of this immediate application. And for me, that comes also with a lot of psychological knowledge or psychological understanding in terms of the defenses or how you relate at the boundary level of everyday life, everyday practice. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. I wanted to build on something that Josh and Sigmund alluded to with the complexity of understanding sub-concepts by turning the question to one that Yammer, I think, asked. What stage in education should biosemiotics education begin?
Yeah, good.
It's a hard question. See, when I was at school, we got set theory, even maybe the last thing in the gymnasium, and now then afterwards they teach it in first grade, 7-year people. So this question, when one can be taught semiotics, so pretty much, because that's very important part, because when you teach birds and insects, that should be from, well, before one goes to school, but semiotics, because that kind of capacity for abstraction, say what also you said, that's just, this is really, you cannot go to that tour, really. Now I see that also to our master program in Estonia, people who come are often 40 years old, and sometimes adding this to their already existing master and so on. Probably there are two aspects. So some part of it, just to see that communicative nature of life, that should start from the very early years. But on the other hand, biosemiotics with its theory as such, this is just really an advanced level.
It's kind of an odd thing. My first instinct is to say, yeah, they have to be old enough. But the reality is, if you're a kid and you're going to think things that go in line with biosemiotics about communication, about what other living beings perceive, it's just that we demolish that way of thinking and then we have to rebuild it. I was receptive to it as a student in the master's program, but I was in my 20s and I had enough encounters with things that would still make my curiosity about how other living beings would engage with the world alive, right? Go ahead.
Just one more thing to add. So, because according to my understanding, biosemiotics, this is Jesper Hockmer's words, paleobiology, what we are going to do is to change the whole teaching, whole understanding of biology as such. So that, if that can be achieved, and I'm sure it will, then that means that already when people, biology is taught, biology should be taught differently. So, biology should be taught on relational, communicative basis. So, and in that sense, then of course, biosemiotics starts early.
Well, as usual, I want to bring us back to considering whether, to what degree, it sort of depends on the mature mind, but I would say also the immature mind, because little children are very themselves, they are curious, and that should be our middle name as Homo non sapiens. We are curious. That can be captured or expressed or discovered at any and all ages, but the very young, absolutely. And I don't think of teaching as imparting anything. For me, you can't separate teaching from learning and a number of other things. So I don't think imparting, I mean, it's sharing, but it's co-creating every step of the way. So I can deal with people at any age without realizing that I might be exercising or exhibiting or sharing biosemiotics. And I don't think semiotics should be parsed into non-biosemiotics and semiotics, because it is semiotics. And semiotics recognizes that, like Monod, to be able to accept and imagine and integrate the whole accident and necessity. So that's what living things are. They're a combination and exclusions of the potential of accident and necessity.
Let me please make an untimely intervention. I was under the impression that the journal board meetings can start at 12:45. I've just been informed it has started. However, I would like Josh to take over the discussion for the rest of the room and discuss these questions. What is the one thing you want your students to take away from biosemiotics?
I would like to say one more word.
But then we have to go to the journal meeting, because you're on the way too.
No,
Or you're not?
no, I'm not. I find it amazing that Kalevi came up. I mean, the first association was when set theory should be taught. And that was just by coincidence, we hadn't thought about it before. When I was proposing this question, when biosemiotics should be taught, because I also learned set theory Boolean algebra in the last year of gymnasium, and now it's being taught in very early. So just departing from that, well, for me it was really to discover that there was a different kind of algebra possible.
Thank you all very much. You really have to go.
Okay.
Please continue the conversation. Apologies for the bad timing. Yeah, you stay here and take over with
Okay,
Josh.
okay.
Other people
So-
who have taught biosemiotics because
Yeah, I think it's
So I very much agree with Kalevi's proposal and Dean's point. The question is to be split actually. More specific biosemiotics formally, together with the history and more etc. thing we talked later. But I think also semiotics can be kind. Its questions can be kind a bit earlier, not way back in the beginning of the education, but somewhere towards the end of gymnasium, or taking into account the way the education is declining actually, perhaps in the first year of university, not with the answers provided by great thinkers, but just the questions and let the students deal with the problem, trying to look back at all the formal education they have acquired until that moment from this perspective. These are science systems we have and not a real thing. So, of course I know that nowadays it's very difficult to let the students work autonomously on some questions themselves, because the moment you ask a question before you even end your sentence, they start Googling, start throwing back your back to you the answers they find there. But it would be, I think, good to start with an introductory course or seminar or exercise, I don't know, where you would really ask the students to evaluate everything they have learned from a semiotic perspective. And once they have kind of digested this kind of questioning, biosemiotics can be built upon it later on for those interested.
Did you want to comment before I?
Yes, please. One of the things that Bergson says about philosophy is that philosophy is a process of asking good questions. Philosophy is a process of asking good questions. So, I like what you're saying. There's one step that I'd like to suggest removing from your approach. Okay, good. Don't approach a student and say, rethink your reality from a semiotic perspective. Approach a student using semiotics to understand or sympathize with what their perspective is, and then ask them a question that they actually care about. Because then they're not going to go to Google. I taught middle school in an English hybrid language place, and kids love learning about the history of symbols and medicine and their place in the world. They're already thinking about it. Kids are amazingly intelligent, especially nowadays with all the information they have access to. Just to go a smidge into it, there were a couple of girls in grade 8 who had formed a little bit of a coven, and they were very interested in the historical period of the witch burning trials and where that came from, and why patriarchal systems of power decided to start identifying and burning women. And that's a really good question. So when we talked about it, a lot of that stuff you can't find on Google, because a lot of that stuff isn't a part of the reality of the information that circulates, but it's real, and it's there, and facing that reality is something that semiotics is prepared to do. So, let's face that reality.
I will abuse my position really quickly, and just I want to qualify something, and maybe not do exactly what Don wanted, but really write off what it is we're saying, because I think that I remember in chemistry that I was taught the Bohr model first, which is a way to basically just do bookkeeping for chemistry. But then when I went into physical chemistry, and you have to unlearn the Bohr model in order to learn, quantum mechanics and how it is chemistry, actually works. It's not that the Bohr model was wrong. It's just that it's teaching one thing, and then to get to the next level, sometimes you have to unlearn what it is you were previously taught. So I'll start with you, and you can talk about what you would like. But I just want to plant in all of us kind of the question, as we were grappling with earlier, where in the education do you start? Because the problem is that we're fundamentally preconceiving reductionism just letting kids do what it is, you know, we've done for the last century. And then we have to undo that. And it's quite hard. So I just want to, you know, plant that, and then maybe it's not an either or, let's say, or we need to insert, you know, a very particular curriculum at X, Y, or Z spot. But then we could ask ourselves, like, what's the end goal, like where it is we want to end up, and then work backwards, and how it is we teach what we teach to get there.
Thank you. I mean, I think maybe to bring some of those together, there's a quote from Twelfth Night from Shakespeare that I always think about in relation to semiotics that I have to adapt the quote a little. That some are born semioticians, some become semioticians, and some have semiotics thrust upon them. And originally it's greatness, but if one level of educationally thinking of it linearly, you know, when in our development as organisms are we ready for semiotics? If we think about it pedagogically, of where in what curriculum does it fit? I would also suggest contextually that a big part of semiotics comes forward in crisis, because it is meta-reflexive, it is relational. And so often people come to semiotics when they need it, when it is the only vehicle that can make sense of what doesn't make sense. Whether that's moments of neurodiversity, moments of disability, moments of war, moments of health, whatever it may be. And so in addition to thinking of sort of the linear pedagogy, and I think we all have, I mean, this would be a fun book sometime of how we all met semiotics and when and what those circumstances were. I think for many of us it's also a bit nonlinear. But looking at context where then semiotics is most useful, and looking at pedagogical moments, you know, if you have a class that's half hearing disabled, if you have a class where the school burns down and they have to move or go in the field, I mean, or a country that's losing its educational system. And so also thinking about semiotics in those spaces of both crisis and healing, where meaning becomes not just something you're reflecting on, but becomes absolutely necessary to survive.
Can I say something very quickly?
Okay, very quickly, because we have 3 more people and I don't want to go over.
I want the speakers.
You've earned your role. Alright, so we have like 6 minutes. I really don't want to hold people too long. So we'll do these 2 guys and then you 2 guys and then we'll conclude.
The human being is very much able to handle the blooming, buzzing confusion of the world. Brains are made for that, and so you should not prune too early. You should not teach the reductionist paradigm and then unlearn that, unteach it later. That from the beginning they should be non-reductionist.
Okay, so good that you said it's in between, because I was actually going to thank Josh because he coined the notion of unlearning, and given the fact that most probably some reductionist things are going to be taught to the students anyway, we could, I mean, kind of introductory course I suggested could be used to unlearn them, or actually to learn unlearning, that unlearning is appreciated, because one of the greatest dangers I'm observing in students is that they have a great tendency to play for the gallery. And learning to unlearn may somewhat suppress this kind of tendency.
Since I've had the responsibility both for National Times in Norwegian and teacher education, and I'm a linguist myself, I wondered whether linguistic as a main element in primary education had too much place. Instead of language, and Norwegian language, which is my discipline, more often curriculum should be defined as communication. then you can open language, add the aspects of semiotics that goes with communication. And I totally agree with Josh that when you get these people up in teacher education and up to master and doctoral level, you have to unteach them what they have, their way of thinking, so they can get into the world of semiotics.
Hello. I got something to add. This is my biography. And in my talk yesterday, I mentioned the process started 50 years ago. That was me, 5 years, sitting 3 days in the clock room and trying to find out to do shoelaces. Yeah, I think yeah, no, so because everybody told me I cannot do that. So what I experienced as 5 was I anticipated the movement I had to do before I could it, and I trained me afterwards. 5 years with insight. Not only my sister was capable to see this as happening this after 3 days. And since then, I'm thinking in movements. I have a different thinking. And I have every, as I'm not talking too much, when I'm talking too much, it's drinking water. And I have discarded before I talk which circle I compress in this movement, what is important for this situation. That's, again, is the reason I talk with stories. And the question is really, this is also thing to take question, but you have to take question to wonder. And you have to take this question to wonder to a people who is in hierarchy in this position to change everything. And you have to be the movement in this moment to be safe and to do it. Doesn't matter. That's the difference. What I see at the moment we have statistics. And everything is come up from statistics, and we can provide the best one. And one. This is the weakness we have nowadays can semiotic different point bring. So that's what I would add. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, guys. Let's end what's that?
We have earned our lunch.
Yes, we have earned our lunch. Very brief, yes. Keeping people from lunch, so.
Only 15 minutes.
Thank you for all the suggestions. Apart from my dissertation at university, I teach at high school, and I agree that children any age can start becoming biosemioticians. And thank you for saying that we should start non-reductionist, because why waste time teaching them something that's wrong or unproductive, unfruitful? One thing that has worked, because my high school students, even first grade high school, respond very well. Just bring an insect, bring a hoverfly, bring whatever, mimic or non-mimic, aposematic, bring it in. There is no stopping them, there is no Googling, they're magnetically attached to it. And then another thing is, which is, I am the high school teacher who invited Jana Schwartzova and Anton Markos to our school to talk to our students. You wouldn't believe how engaged they were, and an hour after the talk they were still asking questions and talking about that. So if you're a university level biosemiotician, get in touch with high schools in your area and offer a way to liven up biology / linguistics / whatever they teach. Go there, show them, share with them, and this way the wider populace will hopefully be more aware of biosemiotics.
That's a great
Very